Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Broker Bulletin. This time we're going to talk about disclosure issues. We actually had a really good meeting today with John Banchek from True Title, and he went over some issues that arise and ways that we can help ourselves to keep from getting sued. One of the things we discussed is the number one reason why we as agents get sued is over disclosure issues. And it's things that we know or things that we should have known. And we do get drug into it even when it's not really even our issues. It's something that the seller should have done, but they still end up going after us because we're the agents. And of course, as they say, agents have deep pockets. I know. But anyway, so some of the things he brought up was, we do have a 5-year statute of limitations on any disclosure issues and the buyer coming back to sue the seller. So what that means is when you sell a house, you're still married to it for the next 5 years. That's the amount of time that the seller can actually still get dragged into a lawsuit. So based on that, you should always default to disclosing. One of the things that John brought up is it goes up the line if you want to ask, should something be disclosed? For instance, if you come to me and say, hey, Mark, should we disclose this? The answer is going to be yes. If you have a question about it, then we should disclose. Likewise, if the seller comes to you and says, hey, should we disclose this? The answer that you're going to give your seller is yes, you should. You should always default back to disclose, disclose, disclose. It becomes anything that the buyer might want to know. For instance, it could be anything from was there ever a leak in the basement to is there going to be any property developed behind us or on that vacant lot next door? If your seller has catches wind that, hey, there might be a development going in on the vacant ground, that's something you should probably disclose. Even if you don't materially know the facts, even if it's a rumor, it's still better to disclose that because it will come back and haunt you later. Remember, anything that a buyer would want to know. If you had the buyer, would they ever look back and go, hey, I wish I knew that? For instance, one of the things that come up, or if there is a repair made. Say your house had a kitchen fire 5 years ago. And then the insurance company came in, they made all the repairs, everything's fine, everything is done. The seller might look at this like, well, there's no need to disclose it, it's all fixed. Would the buyer want to know? If you were the buyer, would you want to know? The answer to that might be yes. I would still disclose that along with all the information showing how it was fixed and everything is fine. But just to alleviate that from coming back and getting you later, I would go ahead and I would disclose that. Now, what if a seller won't disclose something? They know something, or they hedge around. Usually a seller won't come out and say, oh, you know what, we're just not going to say anything. Instead what they'll do is they'll kind of hedge around it. Hey, this really isn't a big deal. It's been fixed. It's all okay. Well, once you know a defect, you need to disclose it. And that becomes kind of a sticky situation sometimes when a seller pretty much doesn't want to address it because they know it's going to affect the value, what the offers are going to get. But now think about that for a minute. If they don't want to disclose it because it's going to affect the offer, that pretty much tells you that's something that needs to be disclosed, doesn't it? Because after all, if it doesn't affect value, why would they care? So I would definitely address that issue. Sometimes you got to dance around it, being the salesperson, explain to them their liability, why they need to, why it's required. If they still don't want to, call me. We'll discuss it. But more than likely, if it's a pretty good problem that they don't want to disclose, you're probably going to want to walk away from that one and let that be somebody else's problem. Because as much as we never want to turn away business, you never want to sell a house and then get drugged back into it 6 months later. Because lawsuits are no fun. There's no way to win. That's why we usually end up settling ahead of time. And knock on wood, we've never really been drugged into one. So we've always got that going for us. But it just becomes a huge issue when you do. So like I said, if your seller doesn't want to, it also gives you another issue of if your seller doesn't want to and they tell you about it, now you know. If they say, hey, they've had this issue before, but it hasn't come up in the last 5 years, so we should be okay. Well, now you know. So now you're on the hook with it also. And as a last resort, if you have to, just walk away from it. Call me on the phone, we'll discuss it, but it might not be worth it. Also, your sellers cannot just hide behind an as-is clause. They can't say, well, let's just sell it as is. I'm going to sell it. I've never occupied. We've all had this, haven't we? Where you have an investor who takes your seller's disclosure and writes a line through every page, and then at the end says, I've never occupied the property, so you need to rely on your own inspections. Well, you can do that. That's fine. But they still need to disclose any issues they know with the property. Or if you have, let's say, kids who are selling the house for mom and dad who've passed away, but the kids grew up in the house. Well, the families own that house for 25 or 50 years maybe. They're going to know issues that are there. So just to say, hey, you know what, I haven't lived there, or I haven't lived there for 20 years, so I don't know anything, doesn't always protect you. So always keep that in mind too. When you get someone who wants to just put the lines through it and just say, oh, I haven't lived there, so just sell it as is. That doesn't absolve you from any liability. Even like I said, even if the item has been fixed, it still comes back to get you. So I want to leave you on that. Don't hesitate to drop me an email or a call if you run into something like this, because it's going to be a big issue. And one of the things I brought up in the meeting is always keep in mind you can use this with your sellers. And the terminology goes, hey, Mr. Seller, don't forget, your neighbor will not forget the items that you did. And by that I mean when the new buyer moves in and they're standing out 3 to 6 months from now and they're doing their yard work, the neighbor's going to come over and go, wow, I sure hope that old Bob got all that termite damage fixed, because he was fighting that for a couple of years. And you don't want your buyers to go, wait a minute, I didn't know anything about that. That's where it's going to come back to get you. So again, it was a pretty long class. It was pretty intensive, and it was really good. I wish everyone could have been there, but I wanted to bring this up just so you had a chance to review it. But just remember, when in doubt, disclose it, and don't hesitate to give me a call. I want to keep you out of trouble later. Thanks.